For those of you that have your Essentials textbook, we're going to start on page 162 is where we're at with communication. Now, before we move forward with communication, I did want to back up just a little bit and talk about functional area cognitive. We've got about half of the worksheets have been turned in for this functional area, but I'm still missing about half. And I think I mentioned to y'all last week, functional area cognitive is a really difficult one because it talks a lot about the different learning styles and about a lot of the different theories that are out there. One thing that was mentioned in functional area cognitive, and you're going to see something very similar this week as well, is that it talks to you about doing observations in the classroom and recording your assessments and observations on the data and what type of form you're going to be using. So I wanted to spend just a little bit of time talking about that right there. Like we mentioned at the very beginning of class, part of the CDA process is for you to collect sample documents that will go in your resource file that you'll be able to use later on in life. And you want to collect as many different resources as possible. Now, this is not something that I'm necessarily going to supply to you. That kind of defeats the purpose. If I were to supply you with everything you needed, then you wouldn't learn and you wouldn't be able to collect, all right? Plus, all of our programs are different, and like for example, the document that you had to collect last week for your observations and assessment, those documents are going to be different depending on what program you're working at and depending on your philosophy and your mission. So you want to go online, and if you just Google preschool observations, assessment tools, those type of things, you're going to find thousands and thousands of different documents. Pinterest, I'm sure you are familiar with Pinterest, is another great resource to help you collect some of these items. You're going to choose 3 or 4 different documents that best represent your program, okay? And we're going to come across this later on when we get towards the end of class. When we start talking about program management, we'll do a whole webinar just on assessments and observations. So be kind of looking forward to that right there. But I know a couple of y'all have emailed me and called me about the record-keeping form. That's something that you're going to collect on your own, okay? Now this week for functional area communication, it is going to start, one of your assignments is going to create, bibliographies on some of the books that you have in your classroom. I did give you a sample document to help you write those items right there, and that's in the back of your workbook. We'll get to that in just a little bit. So some of the things I will try to help you out, but some of them you need to collect on your own. All right? All right, let's talk about functional area communication. The title of this functional area is a little misleading in a way. When we talk about communication, we're talking about verbally talking to one another, non-verbally talking to one another. But you'll notice that as you read this chapter, it's really about language development and about print-rich environment. Okay, so the whole functional area is going to talk a lot about literacy and language and understanding words and reading words and memorizing words, those type of things. So again, we got to get in the right frame of mind, but that's what it's all about. When you look on page 162, you can kind of see the objectives for this functional area, that we want to create an environment that supports language and literacy. It's a short chapter, it's an easy chapter, but it's a really exciting chapter. And this is definitely one where I encourage y'all to think outside of the box and try new things, okay? Can't stress that enough. You've got to try new things right here. make sure that you've got enough books in your classroom that you're able to rotate your books around. And you want to make sure that you have books available in the classroom that represent the current situations you have going on. That's one of the things I love about children's literacy is that you can go out and you can find books for pretty much any topic or any challenge that you're having in your classroom. And we're talking about children's literature right here. All right. Now, I know some of you, from a funding standpoint, may not have as much resources to books as others. But of course, remember the good old-fashioned library donations, half-price books. There's a lot of way to get some of this stuff. You're going to read about, as it's talking about language and literacy, it's going to also talk a lot about oral language development. And you're going to notice between your essentials textbook and your competency book, there's some incredible checklists. So when you go to your either green or yellow book that you have, when you go to this functional area right here, and it starts on page 66 of your green or yellow book, they've given you some great examples of ways that you can enrich communication. And again, we want to use these, to your advantage right there. All right. I forgot to tell y'all, make sure that you mute your microphones. We got some background noise that I can hear, so I like to leave the microphones open if I can.
I have music too.
Go ahead and mute them. All right. And then that way, if you've got a question or comment, you're going to have to type it in now. All right. It's going to talk about dual language learners. And again, I know we kind of had a little issue at the beginning of CDA this time around about people saying that this does not apply to me. This is, again, where you're going to have to think outside of the box. I know that you may not have a child in your classroom right now that speaks multiple languages or that English is a second language. But I really want you to think about what you're going to do so that when you do have this child in your classroom, you're going to be able to support them. All right. So again, part of the CDA process is not only looking at your current group of children, but future children as well. Okay. It's going to talk about children's reading development, writing development, and then partnering with families so that we can get more literacy opportunities in the household as well. All right, so going over to page 163, it's going to talk about labeling. Now, I know several of y'all that are in the CDA class right now, you're going through the Texas Rising Stars program. And, probably one of the main reasons why some of y'all are doing this. This is a big thing with TRS, with Texas Rising Star, is that they want a print-rich environment. They want to see a lot of labeling. They want to see a lot of multicultural. They want to see a lot of anti-bias within the classroom and evidence of this within the classroom. So as you are preparing for that assessment and even your CDA assessment, this is a big chapter right here. Remember that at the end of your CDA process, you're going to have a PD specialist come out and observe you and your classroom. The way your classroom looks is just as important as you and how you answer the question. So pay close attention to page 163 when it talks about displaying labels and print throughout the classroom, okay? And kind of use this as a checklist. You guys can read all this stuff on your own. All right, so I'm not going to read right out of the book. On page 165 and 166, there is a great little section right here on selecting appropriate books for the classroom. I think this is really good for y'all to read over as well. Don't just throw any book in the classroom. It has to be an appropriate book. All right, but 167 is a big one. Okay, and on page 167, this is actually one of your questions in your workbook this week right here, but you're going to want to spend some time this week evaluating the books that you currently have in your classroom. So you don't have a whole lot of questions in your workbook this week, but don't think you don't have a lot of work because you got quite a few things you need to do. You want to go through and evaluate every book that you have in your classroom, make sure that it's appropriate, make sure that it's in good repair, and then kind of make a little wish list of things that you need. you'll see on page 167 that it talks about categorizing your books and making sure that you've got a good balance of these books within your classroom. Okay, I need to back up for just a moment. I apologize. When we talk about labeling and having a print-rich environment, how many of y'all on this webinar right now, let's be honest, okay, how many of y'all on this webinar right now have your outdoor environment labeled? Does anyone have any a print-rich environment anywhere on their playground? If you don't, I challenge you to look into this, okay? Contact paper, cardstock, you can do some labeling out on your playground. But this is an area that a lot of people forget about, okay? But also when the children are out there running, when the children are out there playing, their brain is very active. It's a great opportunity to expose them to this print-rich environment, okay? So, you know, and there's a question in your workbook about that this time around, all right? Again, it's going to go over on page 168 and 169, setting up your preschool literacy center. What all is going to be included in your block area, I'm sorry, your book area, your writing area, your listening area, and technology for those of you that have technology in the classroom. When we talk about technology and we talk about communication, you're going to read about audio books and an opportunity for children to put on headphones and listen to a book being read to them. There's a lot of great resources out there for this right here. However, I challenge y'all again to not use these items, all right? I challenge you to get a tape recorder, get your laptop, whatever works best for you, and you being the classroom teacher, you have the voice that the child is familiar with. Record yourself reading some of these books and then have that available for them to listen to in your technology area or literacy center. You're going to see a big difference in the response from the children when they're hearing your voice rather than some stranger's voice, all right? So it's kind of a cool little thing right there. Another thing that I really challenge y'all on in this functional area is to create your own books, all right? Grab your classroom camera, take pictures of the children doing various different things throughout the classroom. You can even write a little script if you want to. Take pictures of this, illustrate it, you know, put it down on paper, kind of let the kids help you narrate it. What do you think's happening in this picture, and write it out. You know, glue stick those pictures down, laminate it, bind it together, and create your own classroom books, kind of your own little publishing area. I love this. It's one of my favorite things. Children absolutely love it. They will cherish those homemade books over anything else. So again, and there's a little section in here that's going to talk about that. All right. Again, figure 38 is going to be one of your best friends in this functional area. So on figure 38, creating a literacy-rich learning center is going to give you some good tips and suggestions on things that you can do right there. All right. And then we move on to oral language development. And I'm actually kind of saving this one for our webinar on Thursday because our whole webinar on Thursday is going to be about lending interactions to children and things that you can say, conversations that you can bring up. But go ahead and read through that, you know, whenever you go through your chapter. But just know on Thursday, that's the whole presentation is going to be on lending and interacting with children. All right. Very good. And then it's going to go on to talk about children with special needs, those type of things. All right. Very cool. Like I said, a little sorry about that. On page 191, I wanted to pay attention to page 191. You know, one of my favorite things to do in the classroom, again, is circle time. Absolutely love circle time. So figure 39 on page 191 is going to go over reading aloud to children and the benefits of reading out loud, how it creates new words, how many words a child should learn, all of that stuff. I apologize, guys. Those type of things. So take a look at that. All right. I wanted to go over a couple of the questions that are in your workbook today to kind of help y'all off on the right foot right here. Um, again, whenever you go to answer your questions this week, I really want y'all to think about what you're currently doing in the classroom and how you can enhance it, how you can make it better. All right. So can we go ahead and safely say right now that no one is allowed to say this doesn't apply to me, or no one is allowed to say what I'm doing right now is perfectly fine? Okay. So I want y'all to expand your thinking, and there's going to be a lot of that this week. All right. It's going to talk about to describe your print-rich environment. When you answer this, not only talk about what's in there right now, but what are you planning to do? I talked about the challenge of having outdoor enrichments and print-rich environment. On question 5 of your workbook is where it's going to talk about evaluating books for preschoolers. So again, on question 5, you want to refer to page 167 in your Essentials textbook to help you with that right there. All right. Same thing with categorizing books is going to be on page 167. All right. On question 10 of your worksheets this week, this is again where you're going to start your bibliography. I gave you a sample document on page 129 of your workbook. So I'm going to type that in here, page 129 of your workbook that I mailed you. Has a little document that you can use to help you with your bibliographies. This is going to be something that will go into your resource collection. So I would encourage you to type this out, make it look really nice and professional, but you're going to need to have these, okay, as part of your resource file. So once again, I know by the way, we have some new people on the webinar today. I forgot to recognize y'all. We have several new friends on the webinar today from several new schools. So welcome, and I promise you I'm not sick every single time I do this. But part of the process is that as we go through each functional area, you're going to collect resource items as you go. Okay, so that way when you get to the end and it comes time to complete our resource file, you're not going to have to do a lot of work. Most of it's going to be done for you already because you're going to do it as we go along. What you're doing on question 10 with your bibliographies is a big one. A lot of times when I have CDA students that are struggling with their resource file, this is one of the biggest items that they are struggling with their bibliography. So get this done and knock it out. All right. Let's see, I got a question right here. With that question about evaluating books for preschoolers, oh, I'm in the infant room. So do I evaluate the infant age? Yes. Very good question, Erica. You should have literacy and books in your infant program, and that's definitely what you're going to evaluate. And same thing with your print-rich environment and your labeling in the infant room. This still needs to be done. Now, I know that we discussed this in a previous webinar, but when you use photographs in your infant and toddler classrooms, they need to be very large photographs. Usually in an infant, young toddler classroom, I say that a photograph should not be any smaller than an 8 by 10. So yes, an 8 by 10. So big pictures in that infant room. That's all they can focus on. If you're using a 4 by 6 or a 5 by 7 photo, the child can't see that. All right, and that's a big pitfall, a big mistake that we make in our infant and toddler classrooms, is that we do really good at labeling and making a print-rich environment, but our pictures are too small for the children. Okay, same thing with books that you collect for your infant classroom. I was just at a conference 2 weeks ago, and I did have one over here, but there was a good infant toddler book that had the really thick, hard cardstock, but the book was only like this big. All right. that again, the kids can't see the the pictures and everything on that. They can't see the illustrations because it's too small. So you want a nice sized book for those infant classrooms. Okay, good stuff right there. All right. Like I said, on the questions on your oral language development, we're going to cover a lot of this on our webinar on Thursday when we talk about lending interactions to kids. But just remember, I mean, y'all should be asking open-ended questions to your children all day long. By the time you go home in the afternoons, you should be so tired and so worn out because you've been talking and asking questions all day long. And when we talk about oral language development, it's really important that while you're interacting in the classroom, that you're constantly describing your actions to the children, describing what you're doing, describing why you're doing it. And there's multiple reasons on why you want to do that. Number one is to build awareness of what you're doing. That's going to decrease fear and anxiety in the classroom. That it's also going to introduce the children to more and more words. It's going to build their vocabulary, and not only build their vocabulary, but they're going to know what the words meant. All right, they're going to be able to connect an action to the word. So y'all constantly are describing what you're doing to the children, even in the infant classroom. Probably more important in the infant classroom than any other classroom. Those type of things. So make sure you're doing that. All right. Sorry, I keep having to blow my nose, and I don't want to do it on the webcam. So sorry about that. Very good. Very good. Awesome. Any questions or comments about some of the past stuff that we've gone through, previous worksheets? I'm going to open up the microphones for just a second, so hopefully we don't have any background noise. We're going to have a short webinar today just to get you all really started on functional area communication. I really wanted to make sure, does everyone understand the part of the resource file and the collecting documents and where to find documents? Everyone good on that one? All right, hopefully I answered those questions right there. Okay. And then, like I said, just really think outside of the box. One other thing that I did want to make sure that I mentioned to you all today, pay close attention to your emails. I'm trying to keep a lot of communication going out there. Kind of off the subject of CDA for a moment, but we are expecting child care licensing to publish new minimum standards for us any day now. And so they're supposed to go into effect on March 1st, and we still don't have an updated book. I do have the proposed language, but I don't have the final language. As soon as I get this, I'll be sending it out to y'all, and we'll probably have a special little webinar just to go over that stuff with you. Just kind of be on the lookout. It's going to be something a little off subject from what we normally follow, but I wanted to make sure I throw that out to you. And I got a question, do we make copies of page 129 for all of the books we have in our setting? That's a very good question. The sample that I gave you on page 129, yes, you're going to want to create a bibliography, and I think you have to have 10, yes. Your resource file, you're going to have at least 10 of these done. So you don't have to do it for every single book, but you must have at least 10 in your resource file. So great question right there. And that is outlined, like I said, in Chapter 6, Question 10, a short summary of 10 developmentally appropriate books. Okay, so good question right there. All right, so be on the lookout for the standards. Be on the lookout. And you know what? Remember, there's no reason why you should have to do this all by yourself, especially since we have a lot of people in class that are from the same center. When you're collecting your resource files, share that with one another, or maybe split it up where you take a couple, you take a couple, I'll collect a couple. Make copies of it and share it. There should be no reason why everyone has to do this by themselves. And if you do run into a roadblock and you can't find certain things, then call me or shoot me an email, and I'll help you out as well. But I want you to make the first effort, okay? Um, what is the resource file? Okay, so we've talked about this quite a bit over the last 6 weeks, that you have to build a resource file as part of the CDA process. And whenever you go to your competency booklet, you're going to see exactly what needs to be in there. And this is also, I gave you a summary in your workbook as well. But when you go back here, it's back here somewhere, you're going to have to collect all of these items and put it in a notebook is how we normally do it. Okay? And so as we've been going along through the process, you should have been collecting some of the documents where it says like RC3 and like CD1. That's what that is right there. So you might want to go back and rewatch the first couple of webinars that we recorded and you know what should be included in that. But I've given you, like I said, it's in here and it's also in your workbook. All right. Is there a limit, Alice? Can you elaborate on your question? Is there a limit to what? Oh, we got a lot of background noise. I'm going to have to mute the microphones again. Is there a limit? Well, you're going to have to collect certain resources. So again, which resource are you referring to? Like for this one right here, for your bibliographies, it's telling you to have at least 10. So you're going to have at least 10. If you do more than that, that's okay. But you'll have to have at least 10. But as you go through here, it's going to be very specific on what resources you need to collect. Hopefully that answered your question right there. All right. And gang, again, I know that 1 o'clock is usually nap time or break time or something for all of y'all, but whenever you're joining a webinar, please make sure that you're free from other duties and make sure that you don't have anything in the background so that you can focus on learning. I really like it when I can keep the microphones open, but I can't do that whenever there's kids screaming in the background or conversations taking place. So everyone's full and proper attention is greatly appreciated during this process so that we can get the most of it. All right. And those of you that are asking questions about the resource file, if y'all want to call me individually, I'd be happy to go over that with you once again. But in your green or yellow book, if you go, there's no page numbers on here, but you're going to see like right here it says My CDA Professional Portfolio. And this is a summary of everything that you have to have in your resource file, how it needs to be numbered, and everything. So, and again, this is also in your workbook. All right. Any other questions? All right, fantastic. Hopefully I will be well on Thursday because I've got a great webinar to go over with y'all on lending and interactions that's completely separate from essentials. For those of you that are new to the CDA process and this is your first time, when we have our 2 webinars, I usually try to spend Tuesday going over the Essentials textbook and what you're going to be reading about, and then Thursday I have a supporting webinar that goes over material that supplements what is in Essentials. So that's kind of the format that we go through. All right, y'all call me or email me if you need anything. I'm here for you. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Bye-bye.